Will Kyiv sell its drones to the Persian Gulf states, and what is the impact of the Middle Eastern conflict on the war in Ukraine? To talk about it, we're joined by Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of Kyiv Post. Good evening. Ukrainian interceptor drones are in the very middle of the attention in the Middle East, as the countries of the Persian Gulf are looking for a cheaper alternative to US-made Patriot missiles to intercept the Shahid drones Ukrainians know too well from their own country. Now, so the question here is whether Ukraine finally has these cards Donald Trump was talking about more than a year ago.
Well, certainly the situation has changed from the humiliation that Zelensky was forced to experience in the White House, as we recall, to now where he's saying, I've got cards for you. Look, I think it's not so much the question is, will Ukraine actually sell or provide the knowledge? I think for Ukraine it's an important moment for leveraging itself, to emerge from the background. After all, the war has gone on for more than 4 years with Russia.
But what do you mean? Can Kyiv just tease, the countries that wish to buy the interceptor drones?
Some will buy, but the US is also interested, is it not? And that's the point. Will this affect US policy towards Ukraine or not? You've got, on the one hand, an interest in the US itself, not just, I've noted down the United Emirates, Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, and others being interested. This is something very new on the global scene. But also, will this mean that Trump himself will take Ukraine more seriously and its needs to protect itself? Because Ukraine is not looking simply to sell, to give out its expertise. It wants something in return. And so it wants the political diplomatic support, but it wants the Patriot missiles that you've mentioned and more sophisticated air defense things. It's a leader in producing the cheap interceptors that the Middle East states want. But once the war is over, in a week or two or whenever, what then? And in the meantime, we see Trump is still playing along with Moscow, phoning Putin, reducing oil prices, etc., etc. So where does Ukraine stand? For Ukraine, this is a moment where Zelensky can come onto the world stage and say, look, you've got to take us seriously, finally, and not just, abide by the whims of POTUS.
Right. Now, in this regard, what do you make of these reports that Ukraine has already offered the intercepted drones to the US more or less half a year ago, and the offer was rejected?
This is the irony, that Ukraine has always been consistent in saying, look, we are for peace. We don't want to give our territory away, but help us achieve at least a ceasefire, with de facto recognition of the status quo. But Trump, as we've just said, you have no cards to play. Who are you, young man, here in my room? Or Witkoff, or others called the shots. Whereas now the situation is quite complex, not just because the war is not just a quick fix for Trump, but his falling ratings at home, the economic problems, the Epstein files, which have not gone away, more of them have emerged. So he needs to distract, but he also needs some success to show that this was worthwhile. And what are we seeing in the last days? The huge costs of this undertaking, the lack of any strategic planning, the lack of consistency. And what does it mean for Europe, left in the lurch, as it were, by all of this?
What does it mean for Ukraine, this hike in oil prices worldwide, and Donald Trump easing sanctions previously imposed on Russia? What does it mean for Kyiv?
Well, initially a setback, of course, because it will, fill the coffers in Moscow, but a very important ally of Moscow has been weakened, and maybe not fully taken out, but certainly weakened and not in the position of standing side by side and providing not just drones, but the diplomatic support, etc. And Russia has been seen to be weak in following up and supporting one of its principal allies. And basically it's it said, we can't deal with this, and we'd rather still try and stay friends with Trump. That also sends signals.
Well, you mentioned Steve Witkoff a moment before. Now, Steve Witkoff said that, I have a quote here, "We can take them at their word." That was about Russia assuring that they are not sharing any sensible data with the Iranian regime that was about attacking Ukrainian military bases and their allies in the region. So is this naivety or
no? I think it's
an
consistency.
attempt to
I think it's consistency. Trump and Witkoff, they want to remain on good terms. I'm sure there are business deals in the background. When the war ends, let's not go into speculation, but clearly there is a consistent line that we'd rather keep the Russians happy than keep our European allies happy, not to mention Ukrainians who desperately need this. And I mean, the message is the world is shocked by these scenes of, Iranian and US-Israeli missiles hitting cities, etc. Ukraine's experiencing this every day. You've just shown another 9 people killed. Every day, every day, every day. So maybe this also will, return attention, however, briefly to Ukraine and say, look, this is a complex situation in the world, and it can't just be a quick fix here, quick fix there, an attack on Venezuela, pressure on Greenland, and Cuba's next. Where is the consistency? What's happened to the world order? So Ukraine's message in all of that is we are a fundamental part of what comes next, including what happens in Hungary next and the games being played there.
Talking about Hungary and consistency, well, Russia seems to be rather consistent in its attempts to meddle in other countries' affairs. Financial Times claims that Russia is helping Viktor Orban's campaign by basically by sending money and buying up some influencers to...
even specialists from the GRU, from the people that do this.
There you go. But the very same tactics, it didn't work well for Russia in Moldova. Do you think it may work this time?
I think it will backfire. But initially, I think, if I may be allowed to stick my neck out and say that perhaps Zelensky was undiplomatic in some of his language, which gave Orban a chance to hit back, so that even the leader of the opposition said, first and foremost, we defend the sovereignty of Hungary. So for a day or two, it was all about Hungary. But it's not just about Ukraine. This is being played. It's about Hungary's relationship with the EU. Not just blocking the aid for Ukraine, but just being the troublemaker, the wrecker in the pack. Which fits in perfectly with Moscow's intentions.
So it seems. Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of Kyiv Post, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, as always. And thank you for watching. That's all we've prepared for now. But don't go away, as Adam Yasser will go on the record with Kurt Volker, former US ambassador to NATO, to discuss if the Iran conflict is a prelude to a wider global conflagration.